Welcome back. This tutorial is much longer than it looks. If you are just coming across this video, in the description there's a link to the playlist which will have all the different parts of the sew along as they come out. So what you're going to do if you've never ever done this before is you're going to make a mock-up following the pattern instructions. You can use this sew along as like a buddy companion to sort of help you through, but we're not going to be doing the tabs. You don't need to bind your tabs. You just need to make sure that the bottom stitching is in place so your boning doesn't fly out, so that you can, one, make sure it fits, and two, figure out where you want to cut the bottom of the waist off. Every body is different, and where you want your stays to end at the bottom may not be the same place that I have mine ending. I have arrived at my shape through trial and error because I have made many iterations of this pattern before and I have found out what works for me. Please make a mock-up, make sure the stays themselves fit first, and then you can start cutting bits off to see where you want your final bottom line to be. After you have made your mock-up and you know where you want the bottom of the stays to hit, you can transfer that to the pattern or trace it off to a new pattern and then walk your seams like I don't do here. Because I'm just going to cut the excess off the bottom anyway. It's no big deal. I'm lazy. I give you permission to be lazy if you want, but I also give you permission to go the extra mile if you want to do that too. Remember that your seam allowances are 5/8 of an inch on the pattern, so when you're marking things, make sure to position your pattern piece accordingly. Drink some water. As we are laying our pattern pieces out, we're going to use our ruler and make sure that the grain line of the pattern piece is parallel to the grain line of the fabric. I do this by lining up part of my ruler with the selvage, and then I can adjust the pattern piece under the ruler so that it sits correctly. You want to use something to weigh your pattern down. I made pattern weights with 3 washers glued together and wrapped them in some ribbon, but I used to use butter knives. Really, whatever works and doesn't really get in your way is going to be perfect for the job. I give you permission for the strap to be on the cross grain, which means that instead of lining that grain line up parallel, you're going to line it up perpendicular with the selvage. This strap is not under a lot of tension. All the support comes from the stays themselves. This is just a little extra stability to keep the stays vertically on your body where you want them. You do only need to cut out one set of the straps. We're going to cut out 2 pieces of every other piece that goes into this though. Once you have all of your outside markings and your notches marked, go ahead and mark the top and bottom of all of those boning channel lines. Move the paper pattern piece and then mark those lines in with a ruler. But Hannah, that's cheating. So it doesn't have to be super extra hard, and no one's ever going to see the inside of your garment. You could even line it if you don't like the notes and the marking lines and all that. I give you permission to do that. We're here to make this easier on ourselves. Do artists go out and pluck the butt hair from the weasel in order to make the paintbrush themselves? No, shortcuts are okay. Again, once you have made this and you're sure that you like it, I highly recommend transferring this pattern to a different piece of paper and walking your seams so you don't have to put the extra effort in of cutting off extra stuff every time you make them. Again, I'm lazy and I don't mind that part. So to draw the new bottom edge in, I literally just fold the pattern out of the way in intervals and then make little marks and then reconnect those lines. Just to note here, I am using pen here so it shows up on camera. Also, I'm using a black fabric, so if the pen runs, it's not a big deal. If you are using a light colored fabric, please make sure you're using something to mark with that is not going to bleed through and show or stain your final fashion fabric. Do some tests with some scraps. Because I am easily confused, I like to mark with little squiggles where my bones are going to go in the final finished product. Before I cut it out, I am going to go in and I'm going to mark what piece is what and the orientation of the pieces. Again, I am easily confused, so I'm just going to make things easier for future me by leaving notes for myself. Remember that ideally you are cutting just inside of the lines that you drew so that you're not adding any extra width onto your piece unless that's intentional. If that's intentional, go ahead and do that. But we drew outside the pattern piece, that adds some width. We want to cut inside those marking lines so that we can be as exact as possible in cutting out the correct size. I also like to leave a little extra width on my center front and center backs because I am going to fold them over to finish them. Now that we've got our first set cut out, we're going to move them aside and we're going to do it again, but we're going to flip our patterns upside down. Not vertically flip, but a full flip so that the text is now unreadable because we are cutting out a set of mirror images. The up-down orientation doesn't really matter. That it is a mirror image really, really does. I highly recommend playing around and finding a placement that takes up the least amount of fabric. As we said, this stuff is expensive. The more we save, the more pairs we can make. It is really, really important that all of your pieces be on grain. There is no stretch on the grain or the cross grain, but every woven fabric has stretch on the bias. So it's really important to make sure that you get your strength layer pieces cut on grain. Do remember, because I forgot here, that you want to give a little extra space for your center fronts and center backs. Okay, second verse, same as the first. So now we've only got one more thing to cut out. You're going to take your side front piece and you're going to figure out how big you want your pockets. I wanted this to be deep enough to hold my phone for me. That is about a hand's breadth for me. This piece is cut on the bias, which makes the pocket possible. If they were cut on grain, there wouldn't be enough stretch to actually get anything in the pocket. So make sure you are lining that grain line up with your selvage. Be sure to put the notch markings in. And this piece, I want you to be a little bit generous with your cutting. We're not going to cut straight on those lines. We're going to cut a little bit away because we're going to use that extra width when we actually create the pocket. You do not have to mark any boning channels on this piece. And then after you cut it out, flip it over and mark those lines on the mirror image side because we are going to need those lines later. Hannah, don't we have to cut the fashion fabric too? Yes, but the fashion fabric is so much easier. Technically, our pattern pieces do not have to be on grain on our fashion fabric because they're not going to take the strain of the garment. I wouldn't stray too far from grain because that can cause some bubbling, but we don't need to be quite as exact here. I like to cut generously around all these pieces, but it is most important on the pattern piece to cut generously in the vertical direction. For my straps, I like to cut out 2 pieces of fashion fabric because sometimes these straps do a little flippy and the white couture against the black that I consistently wear is kind of glaring. And that's typically where I stop for the day. I don't like to cut and sew on the same day. I will cut, I will go away, I will do something else, and then I will come back the next day fresh and refreshed and ready to sew. I highly recommend that you, at the very least, take a little break between this step and the next step. Doubly so if any of this was frustrating for you. Go take a break, do something else, reset your brain. Thank you for your patience and grace with me in getting this video out. The releases of these videos will probably be random in and about my normal release schedule, so if you want to make sure that you don't miss it, subscribe and hit the notification bell. If you could also consider liking the video and leaving a comment, that really does help in the algorithm. Thank you. I really appreciate you being here. Please take care of my friend. I promise I'm doing everything I can to take care of yours. I'll see you next time.